What is happening in Nepal and how will it end? Hello and welcome to Insight AI Brief. Before you begin, please like, share, and subscribe. Today, we're embarking on a crucial deep dive into the complex, rapidly evolving situation in Nepal. Our mission is to unpack everything from its tumultuous recent history and the explosive latest upheaval to exploring the myriad potential paths forward for this incredible, yet, beleaguered Himalayan nation.
It's an absolutely pivotal moment and a truly fascinating case study. Nepal's unique geographical position, nestled precariously between two of Asia's most powerful and ambitious giants, India and China, has always made it a nexus of geopolitical intrigue. But the confluence of factors we're witnessing now, profound political instability, crushing economic frustration, the existential threat of climate change, and a burgeoning, deeply angry youth movement, means the recent events aren't just headline news. They are, in fact, a vivid symptom of much deeper, long-standing systemic issues that have been brewing beneath the surface for decades, finally erupting.
You've set the stage perfectly, highlighting that confluence of factors. Now, let's immediately unpack the spark that ignited this very recent upheaval. Let's focus on the dramatic events of September 2025 that have truly sent shockwaves through the country. The immediate trigger, the proverbial match to the tinderbox, was a government decision to block access to several major social media platforms, most notably Facebook. The official justification from the government was that these platforms were being widely misused for misinformation, for spreading false narratives, and for various forms of online fraud. However, for the vast swaths of the Nepali public, particularly the increasingly vocal youth, this was viewed as a brazen, heavy-handed attempt to stifle legitimate dissent, and crucially, to protect what they perceive as a deeply entrenched and corrupt political elite.
What's truly striking here is how quickly a seemingly localized and, on the surface, almost bureaucratic trigger, a social media ban, unleashed such an immediate, furious, and ultimately destructive response. It unequivocally speaks to a level of pent-up frustration, a simmering rage that was just waiting for any outlet, any spark to ignite. This wasn't just about digital rights, It was about years of unmet expectations, of promises broken, and a profound sense of disenfranchisement.
And it didn't take long for that initial spark to escalate into widespread conflagration. The violence unfolded with horrifying speed. On September 8th, initial protests, which began as demonstrations against the social media ban, quickly spiraled out of control. This led to a tragic 19 deaths and over 300 injuries and brutal clashes with police forces across various cities, just awful numbers.
Really terrible.
The next day, September 9th, saw an even more dramatic turn. Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli's resignation. Now, you might logically think such a major political concession would appease the crowds and quell the unrest.
Right, that would seem the logical outcome, wouldn't it?
But, in a grim twist, it did precisely the opposite. The situation intensified dramatically. Despite a desperate 24-hour curfew being imposed across Kathmandu, the capital, and several other major cities, widespread chaos, destruction, and, frankly, anarchy erupted.
The scene described from those days is just chilling. Imagine the parliament building itself, the very symbol of Nepal's democratic aspirations, engulfed in flames. This wasn't just random vandalism. This was a targeted, symbolic dismantling of the state and its perceived representatives. Government offices, the headquarters of the ruling coalition parties, all became targets, and the rage was deeply personal. Former Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli's private residence was set ablaze, with reports indicating protesters openly celebrating his downfall amidst the smoke and flames.
Just celebrating it, wow.
Yeah, and homes of several other government ministers were also deliberately targeted, signifying this deep-seated anger against the entire political establishment.
The human cost of this fury is particularly harrowing. In one truly tragic incident, Rajyalakshmi Chitrakar, the wife of former Prime Minister Jalanath Kanal, died after being trapped and burned in her own home amidst the escalating violence. And then there's the shocking account of Finance Minister Bishnu Prasad Paudel, a 65-year-old man who was chased through the streets and physically assaulted by protesters right there in the heart of Kathmandu.
Terrible. These aren't just statistics. These are visceral acts that underscore the depth of public anger.
Exactly. Beyond the physical destruction, the breakdown of order was profound. Over 900 prisoners escaped from 2 different prisons located west of Kathmandu, adding another layer of lawlessness and instability. For safety reasons, the international airport itself was completely shut down. You can imagine the disruption.
Total shutdown. And, it sends a signal about how serious the instability had become.
The casualty count tragically continued to rise, with an additional 3 deaths reported on September 9th alone, bringing the total to at least 22 deaths and nearly 200 more injuries within just 2 days. A horrific toll.
Indeed, the scale of both destruction and human suffering is deeply alarming. And a critical aspect of this uprising, one that demands our attention, is the demographic driving it. These protests are overwhelmingly attributed to a distinct youth movement, specifically what we call Gen Z. Their anger is not unfocused. It's explicitly directed at long-standing government corruption and a deeply entrenched perception of dictatorial rule. They harbor particular resentment towards the Nepo kids, as they disparagingly call them, the children of the privileged elite, seen flaunting luxurious lives, often in public, while the vast majority of young Nepalese grapple with severe economic hardship, unemployment, and a profound lack of opportunity. The sheer, raw fury driving these young people is palpable and undeniable.
You're right, the Gen Z aspect is absolutely critical. It signals a fundamental generational shift, not just in their demands, but in how they view their government and their own future within Nepal. However, what's equally concerning, despite this immense fury and energy, is the apparent lack of clear, unified, or coherent demands from the protesters themselves.
That's a really key point. Lots of anger, but maybe not a single plan.
Exactly. This absence of a single, unifying agenda only adds to the volatile and unpredictable nature of the political vacuum left by Oli's resignation. In response to this escalating chaos, the army commander has issued a stern warning, explicitly threatening military intervention if civil violence doesn't cease immediately.
Which is a very serious development. The army stepping in, that changes everything.
Absolutely. This isn't just a political crisis. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is being described as the worst unrest Nepal has experienced in decades, arguably since the abolition of the monarchy back in 2008. It unequivocally underscores that these are not isolated incidents stemming from a single social media policy. These are systemic issues, deep-seated grievances that have finally reached a boiling point.
That's a powerful analogy. Much like a fever is a symptom, not the disease itself. To truly understand the root cause of this fever, we need to, pull back the curtain on Nepal's recent history, because these current events, as you highlighted, aren't isolated. They're clearly symptoms of much deeper, unresolved issues that have been building for decades. So let's trace back a little to understand how Nepal arrived at this explosive point, beginning with the country's massive transformation from a monarchy to a republic, a process that unfolded roughly between 1996 and 2008.
Okay, so how did we even get here? At the very heart of this tumultuous period was the Nepalese Civil War, also grimly known as the Maoist conflict. A brutal, decade-long armed struggle from 1996 to 2006. This was not a minor skirmish, it was a fundamental clash for the soul of the nation.
It was indeed a brutal and transformative conflict. On one side stood the Communist Party of Nepal, Maoist, driven by a revolutionary objective to overthrow the 240-year-old Shah dynasty and establish a People's Republic based on Marxist-Leninist Maoist ideology. They sought to dismantle the existing feudal structures and bring about radical social and economic change.
So a complete overhaul was the goal.
Pretty much. The initial police response to the Maoist insurgency proved inadequate, quickly escalating to full army involvement as the conflict intensified. Failed peace talks only further fueled the violence, leading to a protracted and devastating war that claimed thousands of lives and displaced countless others. Both sides, as is often the case in such conflicts, received external support. The United States, United Kingdom, and India provided military and economic aid to the Nepalese government, viewing the Maoist insurgency as a threat to regional stability, while the Maoists themselves reportedly received ideological and, at times, logistical support from other communist parties and networks.
And here's where the narrative takes an even more interesting turn, almost a paradoxical one, when the monarchy itself made a decisive yet ultimately self-defeating move. In 2005, King Gyanendra, frustrated by the ongoing conflict and perceived political incompetence, directly assumed executive power, dismissing the government and suspending the constitution.
A real power grab. He thought he could fix it himself.
Right. He believed he could bring stability and end the insurgency. However, this authoritarian move spectacularly backfired. Instead of consolidating power, it united a remarkably diverse array of opposition groups, ranging from mainstream political parties that had previously been at odds with the Maoists to the Maoists themselves.
So the king's move actually brought his enemies together.
Exactly. They now found common ground in their opposition to the king's direct rule. This unexpected, broad-based unity ultimately paved the way for a comprehensive peace accord in 2006, which not only ended the Civil War, but also led to the drafting of a new interim constitution and eventually the historic abolition of the monarchy in 2008, ushering in the Federal Democratic Republic of Nepal.
The promise embedded in the establishment of a republic was immense, you have to remember. After a decade of brutal civil war, this shift was heralded as a new dawn. It was intended to bring lasting stability, genuine democratic progress, and true self-determination for the Nepali people. The Maoists famously put down their guns to compete in elections, transforming from a guerrilla force into a legitimate political party. That was huge, a testament to the popular desire for a peaceful, democratic transition.
A real turning point.
Initially, this period saw a strong left-wing dominance. Various communist parties, including the CPN Maoists, the former insurgents, now a political party, and the CPN UML, a more mainstream communist party, gained significant popularity. They frequently formed leading governments or strong opposition blocs, implementing welfare state policies aimed at social equity and economic upliftment. We saw notable successes during this time, like in the 2017 election where a unified communist front won a remarkable 174 out of 275 seats in the parliament.
That's a strong majority.
Huge mandate. And this led to concrete achievements, including significant efforts to reduce the entrenched caste system and foster the growth of a middle class through various state support programs. It really signaled a period of hope and progressive change for many.
But then, tragically, came the steady erosion of that hope, marked by chronic instability and pervasive corruption. Despite the initial euphoria of the new republic, Nepal has experienced profound political turmoil, with an astonishing and frankly debilitating 13 different governments since 2008.
13 governments. Just let that sink in.
To put that in perspective, that's an average of a new government almost every single year. A carousel of leadership that severely hampers any long-term planning or consistent policy implementation. This frequent change at the top has been inextricably coupled with widespread corruption, where politicians are often seen, and justifiably so according to public sentiment, as pursuing blatant self-interest.
Enriching themselves and their cronies, basically.
Right, rather than genuinely serving the public good.
And what's crucial to grasp here is that this isn't just a political merry-go-round. It's a structural vulnerability that has crippled the state. The constant shifts in power, often driven by what Nepalists colloquially called dirty politics, frequent shifts in alliances, opportunistic party splits, and outright turncoats between the major parties. You know, the Nepali Congress, the CPN UML, and the CPN Maoist have bred a deep, pervasive public disillusionment.
Dirty politics, that says it all, really.
It does. This instability makes it impossible for any government to implement a consistent, long-term vision for the country. It makes corruption endemic and leaves the average citizen feeling utterly abandoned by their elected officials, regardless of party. It's a deep cynicism that undermines the very idea of democratic progress and the promise of the republic itself.
And this chronic political instability, as you might expect, has had a predictably severe and compounding impact on Nepal's already fragile economy. The nation was still reeling from the devastating 2015 earthquake, struggling through a slow and underfunded recovery effort when the global COVID-19 crisis hit.
Just one blow after another?
Exactly, exacerbating existing economic woes to an almost unbearable degree. One of the most significant and heartbreaking consequences of this long-standing lack of job opportunities and economic prospects has been a massive brain drain and labor migration. Millions of young, able-bodied Nepalese have been driven by desperation to seek work abroad, primarily in the physically demanding sectors of the Middle East, manufacturing in South Korea, or various industries in Malaysia.
Taking their skills and energy elsewhere because there's no opportunity at home.
Precisely. This exodus and the subsequent reliance on their remittances money sent home has become a significant, albeit bittersweet, economic factor for the country. It sustains many families, but simultaneously strips Nepal of its most dynamic demographic.
It's a tragic cycle. This raises an important question, doesn't it? If the shift from monarchy was supposed to herald stability and democratic progress, why has the reality been so chaotic, so prone to corruption, and so economically stagnant? We observe a clear repeating pattern. Initial periods of high hopes, inevitably followed by intense political infighting, and a steadily growing chasm between the political elite and the ordinary Nepali citizen, particularly the youth who are now so loudly protesting. It seems the promise of self-determination has devolved into a struggle for survival and a profound disappointment in the very system meant to uplift them.
So, beyond the immediate political and economic instability we've just discussed, what other deep-seated, often existential challenges is Nepal grappling with? One of the most critical, yet frequently overshadowed by the daily political headlines, is the dire threat of climate change.
Ah, yes, the climate crisis. It's huge for Nepal.
And here's the truly alarming paradox. Despite Nepal's almost negligible contribution to global greenhouse gas emissions, it's a very low emitter. It is disproportionately and devastatingly impacted by climate change due to its unique geographical location in the majestic yet vulnerable Himalayan range.
It's an environmental injustice playing out in real time. As early as 2009, alarming data revealed rapidly retreating glaciers, some receding by over 30 meters per year. That's a staggering rate.
30 meters a year. Incredible.
Yeah. Alongside this, temperatures were documented to be rising at more than 0.06 degrees Celsius per year, a rate significantly higher than the global average. We're also seeing increasingly erratic rainfall patterns, which means either too much rain in sudden destructive deluges or prolonged droughts, coupled with a higher frequency of extreme weather events like flash floods and landslides. These trends directly threaten Nepal's vital water resources, especially the glacier-fed rivers that are the lifeblood of the nation, providing both drinking water and crucial hydroelectric power. The very source of life and energy is under severe threat.
And the impacts ripple through almost every aspect of life in Nepal. Key economic sectors like agriculture, which is the backbone for many communities, tourism, which relies on the pristine natural beauty, and the nascent energy sector are all highly vulnerable.
Everything is connected there.
Totally. More broadly, these changes directly endanger the health, safety, and livelihoods of the Nepali people, particularly those in remote mountain communities. Even biodiversity is being severely affected, with invasive species spreading rapidly, and many indigenous, useful medicinal, food, and nutrition-related plants facing the risk of permanent disappearance. It's an ecological crisis unfolding on multiple fronts.
The proposed solutions, understandably, emphasize adaptation as the top priority for a least developed country like Nepal, given its limited capacity for large-scale mitigation efforts, though mitigation remains crucial. The National Action Plan on Adaptation, or NAPA, is a critical framework designed to identify and address these vulnerabilities, but it requires comprehensive, swift, and adequately funded implementation to make a real difference on the ground.
Which is hard with all the political instability.
Exactly. And given its central Himalayan location, often referred to as the Water Tower of Asia, Nepal truly should play a leadership role in global climate discussions, advocating for greater international support and recognition of its unique plight. Its future literally hinges on how these challenges are addressed.
Moving from the environmental to the economic, we see a parallel sense of frustration. Online discussions, particularly on platforms like Reddit, vividly highlight the pervasive frustration over Nepal's glaring lack of economic growth outside the highly volatile tourism sector.
Right, people are asking, why aren't we making things?
Precisely. People are asking why Nepal hasn't been able to develop a robust manufacturing industry like its neighbors, Bangladesh or India, often lamenting that past factories, once promising, have simply closed down. While the potential for tourism is immense, there's a recognized need for significant investment in training the workforce, from guides to hospitality staff, and crucially, in developing sustainable infrastructure to fully capitalize on it. It's not just about having the world's highest mountains, it's about making them accessible and beneficial to the Nepali people in a sustainable way.
Absolutely. But what's truly fascinating in these online discussions, and really gets to the heart of a deeper ideological debate, is a significant critique, particularly articulated by a 23-year-old Reddit commenter, concerning Nepal's perceived overemphasis on STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Oh, interesting. So too much focus on STEM.
That's the argument. This commenter argues that focusing predominantly on STEM, while seemingly progressive, often leads directly to the brain drain we just discussed. They describe it as technical labor being exported to foreign countries, essentially becoming slavery to the neoliberal world order, implying that Nepal is training its best and brightest simply to serve the economic interest of other nations rather than building its own internal capacity.
That's a strong, provocative take, and it certainly challenges conventional wisdom about the perceived universal benefits of STEM education for developing nations. This commenter advocates passionately for a robust focus on the humanities, arguing that subjects like history, philosophy, and a deep understanding of ideology are what truly build and unify nations, citing examples like the foundational philosophies of China, the ideals of America, the cultural resilience of Japan, and the unifying principles of ancient Arab empires.
A very different perspective on nation building.
Very different. They point out Nepal's perceived deficiencies in education, particularly in Chinese and Indian history, in foundational philosophy, and a profound misunderstanding, in their view, of what modernity itself truly means for Nepal, rather than simply importing foreign models.
And this brings us to a truly unique and thought-provoking ideological suggestion they put forth: Buddhist communism.
Buddhist communism. Okay, unpack that one.
Right. This commenter argues that Buddhism, with its emphasis on compassion, collective well-being, and detachment from material greed, and communism, with its focus on state control for equitable resource distribution and social justice, are not only compatible but also inseparable from Nepal's inherent spiritual and historical spirit. They advocate for a state where the collective, symbolically represented by Vishnu, a deity associated with preservation and order, is firmly positioned above capital.
So the state controls the economy for the common good.
That's the core idea, meaning the state, as a centralized power, would be responsible for the fair and equitable distribution of economic resources. This would fundamentally redefine Nepal's economic and social structure, moving away from unchecked capitalism. They propose building this vision by teaching diverse historical and philosophical perspectives, including Chinese history, like the Taiping Revolution.
Right, the 19th century Chinese rebellion.
Exactly. Indian history and its lingering feudalism, German ideology, the critical theories of the Frankfurt School, and a nuanced understanding of how free markets can paradoxically thrive under a strong communist state so long as the state controls the overarching economic direction. Quite a mix.
It's a very ambitious intellectual synthesis. The practical applications they envision from this humanities-focused Buddhist communist approach are incredibly broad. For instance, addressing the rampant pollution of the sacred Bagmati River, which is central to Kathmandu's spiritual and cultural life, isn't seen as just an environmental engineering problem.
It's a cultural failing.
That's the argument. It's seen as a failure of civic identity and historical respect. The idea is that if citizens deeply understand their history and cultural values, they'll naturally protect such vital symbols. Similarly, historical preservation isn't just about old buildings. It's about preserving the soul of the nation for future generations.
Okay, I see the connection they're making.
Future building, stable borders, and a smooth, corruption-free bureaucracy are not merely administrative goals. They're framed as the natural outcomes of a population unified by a common philosophy, less susceptible to external pressures or internal divisions. This includes the elimination of the caste system, preventing the rise of divisive ideologies like Hindutva, which, is that Hindu nationalist movement mainly from India, whose influence could threaten Nepal's diversity.
Right, preventing external ideological interference.
Exactly. And ultimately, allowing Nepal to truly become, as they envision, a global center for Buddhist thought and practice once more.
This raises an important question, though. How can a nation already grappling with immediate, visceral political and economic crises effectively address long-term existential threats like climate change, while simultaneously attempting to fundamentally redefine its entire educational and ideological path? It seems like a monumental task.
It really does.
The call for Buddhist communism is particularly intriguing because it reflects a profound, almost desperate search for a unique Nepali identity and a self-defined development model, one that intentionally breaks away from what are seen as failed external influences and traditional frameworks. It speaks to a deep desire for a path entirely its own.
Here's where it gets really interesting, perhaps the most pivotal dimension of all: Nepal's geographic predicament. Landlocked between two colossal Asian giants, India and China, its location profoundly and inextricably shapes its destiny. This isn't merely about geography, it's a constant, dynamic geopolitical tightrope walk.
Always caught in the middle.
Pretty much. Historically, India was Nepal's closest and most dominant strategic partner in trade, investment, and politics, a relationship solidified by a 1950 alliance and peace treaty. Nepal was often seen, sometimes literally, as India's backyard state, with India frequently using its considerable leverage, for instance, its control over vital trade routes, to influence Nepali domestic and foreign policy.
A very dependent relationship, historically.
Very. China, by contrast, was historically viewed more as a distant security threat, especially after its occupation of Tibet in 1951, which brought the formidable Chinese military right up to Nepal's northern border.
That traditional dynamic, however, began to show cracks, even in the earlier years. While generally leaning pro-India, King Mahendra in the 1960s strategically initiated a pivot. He deliberately pulled China into Nepal's orbit to counter perceived Indian pressure after India disapproved of his royal coup. He understood that strategic diversification was key to maintaining sovereignty.
Playing them off each other, essentially.
You could say that. It was an early, astute indication of Nepal's enduring desire to balance its powerful neighbors and assert a degree of autonomy rather than being solely beholden to one.
But a truly critical turning point arrived much more recently, with the promulgation of Nepal's new constitution in 2015 and the subsequent, highly controversial border blockade.
Ah, yes, the 2015 blockade, that was a massive deal.
Huge. India openly expressed its strong discontent with the new constitution, arguing that it negatively affected the rights and representation of the ethnic Maheshi people, who were of Indian descent and lived primarily near the southern border. This disapproval ignited protests by Maheshi groups, which swiftly escalated into a critical border blockade in late 2015.
Cutting off essential supplies.
Exactly. Nepal, being landlocked and reliant on India for virtually all its essential imports, especially vital fuel supplies, faced a severe humanitarian crisis. This was particularly devastating as the nation was still struggling to recover from a major catastrophic earthquake earlier that same year.
Just terrible timing.
The Nepalese government explicitly accused India of orchestrating or at least tacitly supporting the blockade to pressure them on constitutional issues, a claim India vehemently denied. However, the perception that India was weaponizing Nepal's landlocked status sparked incredibly strong and widespread anti-India sentiment across the entire country.
And that sentiment really lingered, didn't it? It fundamentally reshaped Nepal's foreign policy calculus. India's perceived policy error with that blockade created a significant, almost unprecedented opening for China to dramatically increase its influence.
So China saw a chance.
They absolutely did. China acted swiftly and decisively, promptly providing urgent humanitarian aid, including vital fuel supplies and signing crucial oil import agreements, directly challenging India's traditional monopoly over Nepal's energy needs. From that moment, China quickly became a major investor across various sectors, progressively replacing India as Nepal's primary economic partner in many areas. Nepal, critically, became one of the first South Asian nations to officially join China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, BRI.
Right, the BRI connection is key.
Very key. With grand plans including a railway connecting Tibet with northern Nepal, a project that promises both economic opportunities and significant geopolitical implications.
The deepening relationship culminated in a landmark event, President Xi Jinping's 2019 visit to Nepal, the first by a high-level Chinese leader in 23 years.
A hugely symbolic visit.
And highly productive. It wasn't just ceremonial, it yielded over 20 cooperation agreements, a substantial 3.5 billion yuan in development aid. And critically, granting Nepal access to 6 Chinese ports, a monumental achievement that significantly reduced its historical, almost total reliance on Indian ports for international trade.
That port access is a game changer, reducing that dependency on India.
Absolutely. Politically, strong ties developed with Nepal's various communist parties through frequent exchanges and training programs, fostering ideological alignment. In return, Nepal reaffirmed its One China policy and committed to repatriating anti-China Tibetan groups, further solidifying the relationship.
China's growing influence became even more visible and indeed overtly direct during a period of intense internal political instability in May 2020. At that time, then, Prime Minister KP Oli was facing significant calls for his resignation from within his own ruling Communist Party.
Right, his own party was turning on him.
Exactly. In an extraordinary move, Chinese President Xi Jinping spoke directly with Nepalese leaders, and the Chinese ambassador then held meetings with PM Oli and other senior party leaders, notably without any Nepalese foreign ministry officials present. These interventions were widely perceived as influencing a temporary resolution regarding Oli's position, effectively shoring up his leadership for a time.
Wow, direct intervention in domestic politics.
It signals a new level of direct engagement where China is not just an economic partner, but potentially a political arbiter in Nepal's internal affairs.
And from Nepal's perspective, this strategic pivot towards China is widely seen as a necessary move to safeguard its national interests and, crucially, to reduce its historical, often suffocating overdependence on India. It's a deliberate effort to assert greater autonomy and sovereignty in its foreign policy, diversifying its options on the global stage.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the geopolitical landscape in South Asia is fundamentally shifting beneath our very feet. India's traditional, almost unchallenged leadership role in its immediate neighborhood is now being actively and strategically challenged by a resurgent China.
A major power shift underway.
Definitely. Nepal's choices, both historically and in this very recent past, are a critical bellwether for this evolving power dynamic. The recent downfall of Ali, who is often seen as strategically closer to China, will undoubtedly be watched with immense scrutiny by both regional giants. The enduring question for Nepal, and indeed for the entire region, is how Nepal can successfully balance these two colossal powers without ultimately becoming a pawn in their larger game, constantly striving to maintain its true independence.
That's a crucial point. So all this frustration we've talked about, the current unrest, the tumultuous history, it paints a vivid, undeniable picture of deep public dissatisfaction and a pervasive disillusionment with the political status quo. So how is this reflected in Nepal's contemporary political landscape? And are there new players, or perhaps more surprisingly, old ideas resurfacing from the past?
Well, it's abundantly clear that the traditional left-leaning parties, the Nepali Congress, the CPN-UML, and the CPN-Maoist, which have dominated Nepali politics for the better part of 2 decades, are experiencing a significant and accelerating decline in popularity.
People are tired of the old guard.
Very much so. This is particularly evident in the 2022 general election, where public fatigue with what many perceive as old politics, rife with infighting, corruption, and a lack of tangible progress, led to a noticeably lower voter turnout of just 61.41%, indicating a broad disengagement.
This political stagnation and widespread disillusionment have, predictably, created fertile ground for new forces to emerge and challenge the established order. The 2022 election notably saw the rise of fresh faces. For instance, the Rastriya Swatantra Party, or RSP.
The RSP, yeah, they came out of nowhere almost.
Exactly, just 5 months old at the time, they unexpectedly burst onto the scene, winning an impressive 20 of the 275 seats in parliament. This party, with its focus on economic development and centrist, pragmatic policies, primarily appeals to the disillusioned youth and the urban middle class. They offer a distinct alternative to the long-dominant, often squabbling traditional parties.
And on the other side of the political spectrum, we saw the Rastriya Prajatantra Party, or RPP, a right-wing force gaining significant and surprising ground. They advocate for Hindu nationalism and, most notably, for the restoration of the monarchy, a system abolished 17 years prior.
Bringing back the king.
Yep. Yeah. They secured 14 seats, which is a remarkable increase from their previous single seat, making them a force that cannot be ignored. This isn't just a minor fluctuation in electoral fortunes. It represents a significant return of a very old foundational idea, now finding new resonance among a frustrated populace.
That return of monarchist sentiment became strikingly visible just months before the September 2025 protests. On March 9, 2025, tens of thousands of people gathered in Kathmandu in an extraordinary display of popular support.
Tens of thousands, that's a significant number.
It really is. They came to welcome former King Jayendra Shah and, crucially, to demand the restoration of the monarchy. This was a truly striking phenomenon, particularly after 17 years of Nepal operating as a republic, showcasing a powerful yearning for a perceived past stability.
The reasons for this resurgence are directly linked to the public's widespread and profound disillusionment with the instability, the pervasive corruption, and the perceived economic failures of the Republican governments that have been in power since 2008.
So basically, the republic hasn't delivered for many people.
That seems to be the feeling. For many, the Republic, despite its promise, has delivered chaos and disappointment, leading them to look back with a nostalgic yearning for a past stability, even if that stability was under a different, more autocratic system.
The reactions from the political leaders to this growing monarchist sentiment in March 2025 were quite telling, revealing the deep divisions within the political class. Then Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli, ever the political fighter, openly challenged the former king, telling him to form a political party and compete in elections if he truly wanted power.
Almost daring him.
Right. Former Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Dubba, with a touch of sarcasm, credited Gyanendra with inadvertently contributing to the Republic's establishment through his past overreach and authoritarian tendencies. And opposition leader Pushpa Kamal Dahal, who emerged from the Maoist civil war, sternly warned Gyanendra against repeating past stupid actions that had led to the monarchy's downfall.
So a mix of defiance and warning from the old guard. This raises an important question. Is the growing support for right-wing pro-monarchy parties merely a nostalgic yearning for a perceived past stability, a romanticized view of a bygone era? Or does it represent a genuine fundamental shift in national identity and political direction for Nepal? The public is clearly signaling its deep frustration with the status quo, and new parties are tapping into that discontent, while the old guard remains defiant, caught between defending their legacy and adapting to a rapidly changing political landscape.
So with all these swirling currents, the immediate unrest, the deep historical grievances, the environmental challenges, the ideological debates, and the shifting geopolitical landscape, what does this all mean for Nepal's future? The situation is incredibly fluid, dynamic, and frankly, precarious. Let's consider the potential outcomes and the profound questions that remain for Nepal as it navigates this tumultuous period.
It's really tough to predict right now.
Definitely. In the immediate outlook, the political vacuum created by Oli's resignation, coupled with the ongoing widespread protests and the lack of a clear successor or political consensus, strongly suggests continued instability, at least in the short term. And we absolutely cannot ignore the army commander's stern warning, which certainly hints at a potential military crackdown if civil order isn't restored soon.
A scenario that would have devastating consequences for Nepal's nascent democracy and civilian rule. That's a really worrying possibility.
Absolutely. Looking at Nepal's political evolution, we have to ask, will new reform-minded parties like the Rashtriya Swatantra Party gain further traction and coalesce into a truly viable alternative? Perhaps offering a more economically focused, centrist path that appeals to the disillusioned youth and urban middle class.
Or, conversely, could the Rashtriya Prajatantra Party and the resurgent monarchist sentiment continue to grow, potentially forcing a national debate or even a referendum on restoring the monarchy? That would fundamentally alter Nepal's political identity.
A referendum on the monarchy. Unthinkable just a few years ago.
Exactly. And some Reddit users expressing a deep existential fear even articulated concerns that Nepal might disappear or be absorbed by either India or China if current trends continue, leading to a profound transformation of its population, languages, and unique culture. These fears, while perhaps extreme, underscore the deep anxiety many Nepalese feel about their national sovereignty and identity.
Those are stark fears, indeed, highlighting the deep anxiety many Nepalese feel about their national identity and independence. And what about the traditional parties, the established communist parties, and the Nepali Congress? Despite their declining popularity and public fatigue, they still hold significant power, deep roots, and established networks. How will they adapt or resist these new forces?
Will they be able to reinvent themselves, or will they cling to outdated ideologies and tactics, potentially exacerbating the current crisis and further alienating the populace?
Their role in shaping Nepal's political destiny remains crucial, even in their weakened state.
Economically, the path forward is also fraught with immense challenges. Can Nepal attract the necessary sustainable investment and create meaningful jobs domestically to stem the relentless brain drain and reduce its critical reliance on remittances?
Which, while vital, don't build a sustainable domestic economy.
Exactly. And critically, given the persistent political turmoil, how will the urgent existential need for climate change adaptation and mitigation be effectively addressed? The scientific evidence of rapidly retreating glaciers and erratic rainfall is undeniable, yet a stable, visionary government is absolutely crucial for implementing the long-term solutions required to protect Nepal's environment and its people.
Then there's the incredibly delicate geopolitical balancing act that Nepal must continuously perform. The intense competition for influence between India and China in Nepal will undoubtedly continue and likely intensify.
That tightrope isn't going away.
Not at all. How will Nepal navigate this without compromising its hard-won sovereignty, especially given the historical precedents of external pressure and intervention? Will the strategic use of Chinese infrastructure, like the new port access, truly allow Nepal greater independence and a stronger bargaining position?
Or will it simply swap one dominant patron for another, shifting its dependency from India to China rather than achieving true autonomy? A critical question.
Finally, and perhaps most fundamentally, the quest for a unified national vision remains largely unresolved. The vibrant debate over STEM versus humanities, the role of ideology in nation building, and the very definition of modernity for Nepal is not just academic. It's a profound societal identity crisis.
Can the nation forge a shared sense of purpose and direction amidst such diverse and pressing challenges, particularly when its disillusioned youth, Gen Z, are demanding a future that seems to diverge so significantly from the paths taken by previous generations?
It really brings us back to the beginning.
It does. This raises an important, overarching question. In a country where political systems have repeatedly failed to deliver stability and prosperity, and where external powers constantly vie for influence, What underlying fundamental shift, be it ideological, social, or economic, would truly allow Nepal to chart its own authentic course and finally realize its immense, often spoken about, potential? It's a complex tapestry woven with historical grievances, present-day frustrations, and a highly uncertain geopolitical future.
A lot to consider for sure. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join us again for another great analysis. Thank you. Given the widespread disillusionment with traditional politics and the burning desire for change, is Nepal's true revolution yet to come? And will it be an ideological shift, a return to the past, or something entirely new?